Shalom, this is Shemai 1, all praises to the Most High, and Kwam Yashala. Hallelujah. So I want to go over this a few books again to give you more understanding of your history, those of you who are of Negroid and Indian descent, Native Indian descent. So this book is called Nature Knows No Color Line. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. I like to start out with this book because it's going to pinpoint certain facts. So this is Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers. I'm going to flip it to the inside of this book, and I'm going to go to page 123, and I want to start right here. It says, for Romans to have taken them for Ethiopians is a clear indication of their color, since the Ethiopians were definitely black to the Romans. So it's telling you right here that the Israelites look like Ethiopians. Okay? I read it again. For Romans to take them for Ethiopians, and I wrote the scripture right there, Amos 9 and 7. It says they are, let's get it. Okay, so as we read that in Amos 9 and 7, as you can see that the Israelites were mistaken as being Ethiopian. Not only that, they were also mistaken as being Egyptian, which they're not. And that's what the rest of this chapter is talking about, with Strabo being the geographist who traveled abroad in 30 BC. He likened the Israelites as being Egyptian here. It says in 30 BC, says the people western Judea were of part Egyptian ancestry, but he says although the inhabitants are mixed up, thus the most prevalent of their credited reports in regard to the Temple of Jerusalem represents the ancestors of the present Judeans, as they are called Egyptians. Doesn't mean that they were Egyptians. They look like Egyptians, and they look like Ethiopians. And we're going to reference these scriptures here on the side. Acts chapter 21, verse 38. Amos 9 and 7. Okay, Genesis 50 and 7. I'm going to reference that. So let's drop down here. This is what I wanted to get to. Like I said, this is page 132, and it reads, starting at 31, especially dark were the Jews of Spain and Portugal. The Portuguese Jews, I'll start at 31, especially dark were the Jews of Spain and Portugal. The Portuguese Jews were very dark, says Pritchard. Okay, it says the Duchess de Abrantes, wife of Napoleon, ambassador to Portugal, said that the Jew, the Negro, and the Portuguese could be seen in a single person, because these people, the Negroes, the Israelites, look different from the rest of these people who were so-called black people. All right, in those days, those who were from South Africa or East Africa, they look different. Okay, so it says, so dark were the Jews, especially of Portugal and southern Spain, that many whites, that all Jews were black or dark. See that? So as we turn over, let's go to the bottom reference here. It says, many of the Jews who were banished from Portugal by John II settled in the West Indies. John Bigelow, who visited Jamaica in 1850, saw the descendants of these Jews and says they were Negroid. Okay, so this is showing you that the people who were dwelling in the West Indies were of Negroid descent. Okay, they will never tell you that. So those that they call Moranos, who fled from Spain and Portugal, they fled to the West Indies, and they were Israelites. They were dark or swarthy Israelites. Swarthy is another word for dark. Okay, now let's go to this other book. Here's another book. It's called The Source of History in the Pentateuch. It's by Samuel C. Bartlett. I'm going to flip to page 118, and I'm going to read. This is the second paragraph. In regard to the human race, it has been shown abundantly and historically that each of the external differences often ceases to be characteristic. Thus, the black color is found not only in individuals, as the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes as the Bacarius on the Red Sea, whose hair and character are perfectly Semitic. So it's showing you here that the people of Portugal were dark-skinned as well as the Israelites who were dwelling by the Red Sea. So that is another reference, and it ties into the book that we just read earlier. Here's another book. It's called The Chief Works of Benedict de Spinoza. This is written by R.H.M. Ells, okay, translated from the Latin. See, a lot of our books were in Latin and in what? Greek. So there are some books that are still out there that has not been translated at this point. This is why we need our Spanish-speaking brothers to do research, because a lot of books are in Latin, and even our brothers who are over there in Greece today who could read Greek. This is why we need them today, you know, to interpret these things for us. So let's go to page 13 in the introduction. Page 13 in the introduction. And it reads, this is Spinoza speaking on a gentleman that he met. It says, he was of a middle size. He had good features in his face, the skin somewhat black, black curled hair, long eyebrows, and of the same color, so that one might easily know by his looks that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. See that? So we have to understand that there's many depictions of what we look like in the past, but we have to dig up these works. This is just the tip of the iceberg, brothers and sisters, the tip of the iceberg. So bringing down all imaginations and tearing things down to build us back up, this is what we must do to bring back our heritage so we can praise our power in heaven and be fair about the Israelites being of Negroid and American Indian stock, okay, or Native Indian stock. So this is what we have to work on. So this is very important. Like I said, this is a quick flick. I'm just bringing this out just to refresh your memory, because oftentimes we forget. This is why we pray for the angels to come and restore our memory. So bringing this out so you could be restored. Here's another book. It's called The Image of the Black in Jewish Culture. Now this man, Abram Melamed, he is a Jewish man. He is a Khazarian man. Okay? And can't fault for when they start doing their studies and they put everything in a book. Now this book might run you $100 or more. But I'm going to read on page 210. And let me zoom in. And it reads, following the testimony of Montezumos, Ben Israel rejects out of hand the possibility of identifying the lost Israelites with certain Indian tribes. It was not respectable enough as for the Spanish missionaries and the English theologists or theologians. Their anti-Jewish prejudice, meaning they were mad when they found out who these Israelites were, and their prejudice against non-whites, each fed the other. This is when the racism, the whitewashing began. So anything that was of dark complexion or brown complexion or even light brown complexion was offensive to them, especially when it came to a chosen people. So this is what we're reading here. It says, we have already seen that a strong tradition in the polemic literature of the Middle Ages maintained that Jews were naturally swarthy. Swarthy, if you look that word up, swarthy means dark complexion. Dark complexion, not a tan on Caucasian people. Swarthy means to be of a dark complexion, like bronze. Okay. Certain Jewish scholars like Rashi and anti-Christian polemists in the late Middle Ages accepted this argument, attempting to gain some advantage from it. While Ben Israel had trouble identifying Jews as dark-skinned, he could, however, accept the argument of Abarbanel, among others, that the Jews were originally light-skinned, but their complexions had grown dark as a punishment of their exile. So even in this story that he's trying to lie on, he's trying to say that, okay, yeah, well, the Jews were dark because of the curses. It made them dark. Even if he says that, he's still saying that the Negroes and American Indians, Native Americans, are the true Israelites. As far as he was concerned, the descendants of the 10 lost tribes, supposedly living in South America, still resembled the original light-skinned Jews, unlike the ones he knew who had undergone the vicissitudes of the destruction of the Second Temple and their exile. The former were only slightly tan. Okay, now he's creating a lie. His idyllic description of the wisdom and morality of these long-lost Jews in America was certainly congruent with the idea that their original white complexions had been preserved. Now he's lying to try to fit his mental state. He's trying to make everything feel good to him. So he's changing this to help everybody cope with what he's saying, who are of white complexion. It says, this problem did not exist when the lost tribes were said to be in Africa. So why were they in Africa? Since this identification was originally made by Jews, no one would have contemplated the unthinkable possibilities of identifying them with the blacks. See? It was unheard of. This is why when people say that the Jews are black, they have dispositions. They have awful dispositions about you saying that you're a Negro, or the Negroes are the real Jews. Listen, it says, or even with the falashas, the false Jews. The offspring of the tribes living in Africa, mainly in Ethiopia, were depicted as a separate ethnic group that sometimes even fought the blacks and even influenced them by their customs, circumcision, for example. So he's going in trying to say that the Ethiopians were the Jews, all right? But really, there were Israelites who were dwelling in Ethiopia amongst the Ethiopians who were scattered there as well. Okay? So, just to put something on your mind, I thought I'd bring these artifacts out for you. And just to mind you, there are scholars in all other nations who research this stuff. And they search and they sell these books online over the amount and what they're worth, just so you can't put your hands on it, because they know you either don't care about it, or you're not going to spend the money on it, or you're just not interested. So it's my job and all the other brothers who are teaching this word to bring this out, so you have an idea that the history is out there, and we're trying to show you, if your history is there, then the Bible is true. Okay, so this book is called The History of the Inquisition. The History of the Inquisition. Okay? And it's written by Philippus Van, 1633 to 1712, Limburg. So what they're doing now, they're starting to remake all these books that are out of print. And so what I do is I research where these books are, and then when they come available, I purchase them. And then I research them, and then I bring out the history to you, brothers and sisters. So I'm going to start on page 33, and I want you brothers and sisters to see this, because I did a video before based on the fact that our history is still here. It's just in the vault. So this is going to be based on the external and internal government of Rome, and what they did to our prophets, our disciples, our priests once they died. They dug up their graves. When you see over there them doing archaeology and digging up graves and finding pots and bones, well, this is what they're doing. They're looking for trophies, because Rome was based on relics. Everyone worshiped relics and pictures there. And one of the relics were the bones of the disciples. Okay, so I'm going to read this here. This is page, like I said, page 33. And it reads, 150 years after the glorious deaths of St. Peter and St. Paul, the Vatican and the Ostian Road were distinguished by their tombs, or rather by their trophies. Okay, these were trophies, their bodies. In the age which followed the conversion of Constantine, this is during the time of Constantine, this is when it all started, when Christianity and paganism and Judaism was all converged and mixed in together. Okay, in the age which followed the conversion of Constantine, the emperor, the consuls, and the generals of armies devoutly visited the sepulchres of a tent maker and a fisherman. Now, you know who those tent makers are and the fishermen are. The tent maker was Paul. The fishermen were who? The disciples, or Peter. It says, and their venerable bones was deposited under the altars. You see that? Of Christ, of HAMASHAYACH, on which the bishops of the royal city continually offered the unbloody sacrifice. So what they mean by this, the altars of Christ. So I've been to Rome before. In Rome, they have, you know, where Pontius Pilate brought YAHAWASHI before the crowd to try him in a trial, to find out if he was guilty or not. And they all said, crucify him. Well, there was an altar that he had to walk up. That altar was removed from Jerusalem to Rome. They took that altar down bit by bit, and they moved it to Rome. And now if you go to Rome, you'll see the altar, and they'll talk about, yeah, Christ walked up this altar. This is where he saw Pontius Pilate. This is where he was crucified. This is where he received the sentence of being crucified by his own people. And so what they did is they took the altar there, and they took the disciples' bones and put it up under there, because we know they didn't take HAMASHAYACH's bones, because he took his body with him. Right? On the third day, he rose from the dead. So let me read on which the bishops of the royal city continually offered the unbloody sacrifice. So they still do sacrifices on that altar. Okay, the new capital of the Eastern world, unable to produce any ancient and domestic trophies, was enriched by the spoils of dependent provinces. What is dependent provinces? These are cities, states that depended on Rome to supply them with food, security, all types of goods, and so forth. Okay, so they were dependent provinces. Jerusalem was a dependent province under Rome, as well as a lot of other cities during that time. It says, the bodies of St. Andrew, St. Luke, and St. Timothy had reposed, meaning laid, near 300 years. They had been in the ground 300 years. In the obscure graves from whence they were transported. Where were they transported? Just like those stairs were transported, they dug up their bones and took it to where? To Rome. And put it up under the basilica. This is where you get the basilicas from. Basilica is what? Basilica is a church or a designated place that the Pope designates as a relic place. All right, where they could worship. It says, in solemn pomp, to the church of the apostles, which the magnificence of Constantine had founded on the banks of the Thracian Bosphorus. Okay, about 50 years afterwards, the same banks were honored by the presence of Samuel. So they also found what? The ashes or the bones of the burial place of Samuel, the prophet. That says, the judge and the prophet of the people of Israel. His ashes deposited in a golden vase and covered with a silken veil were delivered by the bishops into each other's hands. See that? So this is what they're doing. They're doing all these cruel things, these wicked things. And that's why I said our history is hidden in Rome, at the Vatican. They got all our stuff. They got our records. They have our babies' births. They have our elders' deaths certificates. They have all the certificates that we kept on hand. They have our prophets' bones. They have all of our things like our thummim and our umen. They have things like that we had, our garments, right? and so our customs as well. And so this is what they do. So our history is here, and I'm just showing you that our history is here. Okay, so this is the last book. Okay, I promise you, this is the last book this time. This is called Modern Judaism, Jews in Modern Time. All right, this is by John, 1771 to 1839, Allen. So this was during the time we were in slavery. This book was another book that was reprinted. Okay, and so I'm going to go to page 231. And I'm going to read about Esau, because we talk about Esau so much. I'm going to prove to you that the so-called white man or Caucasian man that was in Rome was Esau. Okay? It says, Esau's descendants are the subjects of extensive traditions in which the root rabbis, with the effrontery at which we should wonder in any other men, have set at defiance, meaning they defied whatever we had, at defiance all authentic history and accurate chronology. So he's showing you here who is defying all of our history and taking our heritage. Esau, even to this day. These representations, the fallacy of which will be too obvious to require being pointed out, may be briefly comprised under the following heads. First, that the descendants of Esau, the sworn enemies of the descendants of Jacob, even to the end of the world. So look around. Who is running the world? Look at the White House. Look at the UN. Look at all these places, and who is running the world? Look at Russia. They are not third world countries. All right. Were at first a small nation. So Esau was a small nation. We all understand that. Because people say, well, how can Esau escape and become such a great nation? Well, Esau merged into all other nations and took their heritage, just like he took the Japhetic people. Okay? Inhabiting Mount Seir in the adjacent country contiguous to the land of Canaan, that they were easily confined within their own limits as long as the Israelites enjoyed a great and formidable empire in Canaan, but that after the powerful republic of the 12 tribes was destroyed by the Assyrians and Babylonians, they wonderfully increased in numbers and strength. Now look at that. How about that? Extended their dominion towards the west. Okay, so when you say the west or the north, that's talking about Europe and America. They called Europe too the west. Okay, spread their colonies far and wide, subjugated Italy, founded Rome and the Roman Empire, at length entirely overturned the Jewish state which had been restored after the termination of the Babylonian captivity, so that Jewish should be Israelite state. The second temple being destroyed by Titus Vespasian, and that in the present day professing the religion of YAHAWASHI of Nazareth, which they were the first of all nations to embrace. So they embraced Christianity, but they didn't want to embrace the Israelites' laws. They wanted to become Jewish, or they wanted to become what the Israelites were. It says, they hold the dominion over all Europe. See that? Over all Europe. Esau detained in captivity his brother Jacob. Now this was written in the 1700s. There's nobody to argue this fact. Okay? So he's telling you that Esau was the man who dwelt all over Europe. Esau detained in captivity his brother Jacob. How did he do that? The Black Plague and the Atlantic slave trade. At least as far as regards the tribe of Judah, till his Messiah ben David shall appear. Okay. Secondly, that the prophecies of the prophets against Esau, Edom, Seir, and the cities of Edom, especially those of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Obadiah, have not yet received their full accomplishment. So a lot of you that say that the Old Testament is not in effect are crazy. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Obadiah, those prophecies haven't been fulfilled yet. For that though the house of Esau has experienced some particular judgments of the Most High on account of the injuries at different periods of time inflicted upon Israel, Yet the final vengeance on account of the last and greatest injury, the destruction of the second temple by Titus, and the transportation of the Jews into captivity. Okay, so that just happened, right? In which they are still most opprobriously detained, is yet impending over it, to be executed in the time of the HAMASHAYACH. That this is foretold by the prophets and all their descendants of the severest plagues against the house of Esau, the cities of Edom and Mount Seir, which all belong to Rome and the Christians. Look at that. So you Christians who are worshiping the Christ, the one you call Jesus Christ, that is not a form of what the Most High gave us. He gave us laws, statutes, and commandments. The Christianity that you are under is Roman Christianity. You're a Roman Christian. You are not the Christian or the anointed one that the original HAMASHAYACH YAHAWASHI wanted us to be. Okay? He wanted us to do everything he did plus keep his Father's laws. This is why you have your conscience. When you do things, you remember, well, the law says that I'm not supposed to be with my neighbor's wife. That's what you have to get the understanding of. The law brings back to your memory that you are in the wrong state of mind. So the laws are still here. That's what HAMASHAYACH YAHAWASHI brought. It says, and that the fate of Christians at that time will be far more dreadful than the Mohammedans, right? Because they were getting beheaded. Our Babano particularly says, the slaughter of the Turks in the future battle will not be so great as that of the Christians. For many of the Turks will escape, according to Isaiah, right? 19. That looks like 26 and 19, verse 26 and 19. But of the Christians, I'm sorry, that looks like Isaiah 16, chapter 16, verse 19. But of the Christians, Obadiah says, there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau. So he's giving you the whole, everything we've been saying all these years about Esau, he's saying it in these 2 pages. Word for word for word, everything that we have said. It's right here in the scholarly paper. If you can't get that, then you need to read the Bible over and over and over again until you can get it. Okay, so I'm going to say, Kwam Yashala, all praises to the Father, Abanawa, Ba'ashem, HAMASHAYACH YAHAWASHI, you know, and so all praises to all those who are watching this video. I pray that it's brought some understanding to you and that you are able to move in the Spirit to learn more about your history and keep his law, statutes, commandments with understanding. And with that, I'm going to say shalom.
This is the word of the Lord of hosts. I took you from the pastures and from following the sheep to be prince over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone and have destroyed all the enemies in your path. I will make you a great name among the great ones of the earth. I will assign a place for my people in Israel. There I will plant them, and they shall dwell in their own land.